Welcome back to the channel, guys. I just got the block back from the machine shop. They did a line hone on my mains. So what I'm going to be doing now, I have my crank kind of just sitting on some 2x4s. I'll clean all the journals. So from the front of the crank, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to use a micrometer and take several readings on each journal. After I clean them. And you don't ever want to take a reading, obviously, like right over a oiling port. So make sure to avoid all that. Every journal will have them. But yeah, so I'm about to get started, clean all this stuff, pull all that apart. I have 2 sets of king bearings. The part number for standard X, which is 1 thou over, and that's the part number for standard. And my goal is I want around 2.5 thou of clearance. So I'm just taking a shop towel, hit it with some brake cleaner. I'm going to wipe down these journals real quick. And basically you'll be using this to take these measurements. Let's get started. Okay, so I just measured all my mains, the center point measurements, which is what I'm going to use as far as choosing bearings. And this is what I ended up with. This is down to the 10th, so 2 inches, 657 thousandths, and then that's basically a 10th. So they're all 2.657, and then as far as the 10th goes, they're less than half a thou, difference. They're half of a tenth, from the lowest, which is 2.6572 to 2.6577. So, but 2.657, they're all very, very close, which is awesome. So that's good. So there's my numbers, and I think 2.658 is the journal size on paper. So if you were to look up the specs of this crank, 2.658 is the, like your standard size. So we're just a touch smaller than that. And it is, and also another thing I forgot to mention, when you're measuring stuff, you want to be at least 68 degrees or around 68. We're at 75 degrees in the shop. So we are like up to temp. You wouldn't want to measure probably if it's really hot or if it's really cold, because that would affect your measurements. The metal will expand or contract. So we're done measuring that. So we have our journal sizes. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get all this unbolted, but I'm going to zero this, and I'm zero this based off of the 2.658 is what I'm going to do it to, which is the standard size, because we'll end up having to do some math here. But I'm going to put this, I'll set that to 2.6580, put that in the vise, zero the dial bore gauge to it, and then I'm going to put the combination of standard and 1 thou over bearings in my mains to try to get the clearance that I'm looking for. So let's get started. So that is set to 2.6580. So I'm going to take my dial bore gauge and set it. Actually, y'all ain't able to see that. Adjust this. Basically, I'm sticking this in here. And as I work this, kind of move it back and forth, which this was zero before, and it might already be set to that. So as you lightly rock this in between the anvils on your micrometer. I'm looking for the high point basically of you rocking back and forth, and that's basically where it's zeroed to. It's kind of a pain to hold that little thing just perfectly in the anvils. Is very like kind of slick. But, so hopefully y'all can see that. So even though it's not the zero when I release it, we know that the distance between this, the little point there and the end of it, is zero once it's taking a measurement. So we'll take this, and I'm gonna undo these caps like I said, and I'm gonna install one cap back at a time with the halves that I think I'm gonna have to run. And I'll stick this inside of here like that, and then I'll rock back and forth, and then I'll see my clearance from zero, and then I'll take that number, you know, and then we subtract it from the 2.658, which is what this is zero to, and then that difference we come back here and do some math, and that'll give us our final clearance. Okay, so we're back down. All the caps are pulled, bearing shells are pulled, so I'm going to start. I think I'm going to do a half and half mix on every one, and then take measurements and see what I'm working with. So I'm going to do a standard and then a 1 thou over shell on all 5 mains, and then torque everything down to ARP's spec. I'll take, this is a standard. I'm gonna do standards on the block side. See little valleys in it for oiling, and then I'll do my 1 thou over on the cap side. And there's little tangs, which is like a locating tang. So you put it in there. And these have some spring to them. You try to push it in, so you're not like scraping it. Push it all the way down. Basically, make sure it's perfectly centered, squared. So that's a standard, and then I have a 1 thou over. I'm going to wipe all this down again. I have a 1 thou over on the cap side. And then I'm going to take my Allens, my little Allen keys, and just, I mean, barely any pressure, but make sure these are all the way tight. Or all the way down, I should say, seated. And again, I mean, I'm just using my fingertips. They kind of came up when you pull, when I was undoing some things. So I'm just barely making sure those are fully seated. You take your cap, which again, I already have the 1 thou over, which is, this is the thrust. The number 5 main is the thrust, so that's the thrust bearing. Make sure it's pointing the right way. Get right there, make sure your kind of even on both edges. Take a little dead blow. The camera's sitting right on it. Take my dead blow. I'll still get up. Make sure your cap's all the way down. There's already ARP lube on all this stuff. Torque everything. The outside's first. Side tins. So now that that's done, we'll take our dial bore gauge that we just zeroed to a micrometer to the 2.658. Basically, you have, where are we at? This little thing right here. As you push on that, that's what moves your gauge. And this is a fixed anvil, this end. So you're basically setting this in there and gently kind of rocking it back and forth on that little part, and then looking at your gauge to find the high point. You know, that'll be your reading. I'm just going back and forth, and then I'll look at the gauge. I'll bring you guys over so you can see what it looks like. So as you can see it goes up and then falls back down. So about almost right in between. That's one. It's on the 2 right here, but it's going past that, right? Which I'm gonna put the camera down so I can just make sure I'm reading it right, because sometimes the angle of looking at a gauge like that might throw your reading off. I'm not gonna look at it on camera, through the camera. But basically, I just wanted to show y'all exactly what you are looking for. Okay, so I measured and I was getting 1.4. So you take 1.4 thou, add it to 2.658, and then that number, then you subtract this from it, and that'll give you what's left over. And if you do that math, it was exactly 2,000. I'm going to go ahead and mix the bearings again. I'm going to do number 5 again. I'm going to untorque it and swap back to the other HX bearing instead of the standard. So I'll keep it HX on both of them and see if it gives me 2.5 thou again. And then I'm going to go and based on my numbers I was getting with 2 HX bearings, I'm going to start mixing to try to get 2.5. So 2 to 2.5 is what I'm going to be aiming for. So yeah, I'm just going to do a time lapse, but I'm basically going to do the same thing, same procedure with all of them, and then I'll measure, and then I'll come back and show you all the final numbers we got. Okay, so they're all done. Here were my final measurements. I end up doing mix and HX on some of them, so kind of chicken scratch. But on the fifth main, I end up only having 2,000 clearance if I did mix, so I did double HX bearings and I got 2.6 thou. Same with number 4, 2 HX bearings, 2.4 thou. Number 3 was a mix, so standard, and then HX was 2.3 thou. Number 2 mix 2.3. Number 1 mix 2.5. So I'm between 2.3 thou to 2.6 is a span. I'm cool with it because I'm 3/10 difference between all of them. Number 2 and 3 being the same. 4, so like the center 3 are like 1/10 difference, which is cool. You know, just and even 1/10 difference from the first to the back. But yeah, that's the process. It's taken me probably like 2.5 hours to do all this in real time. So definitely time consuming, but I'm going slow. You know what I mean? Like I like to double check everything, measure multiple times, etc., etc. But I'm completely happy with that, with those clearances. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, hit me up. I'll do my best to answer everything. You know, again, this is my first time to do a complete short block assembly. I've done some other work on other motors in the past, some Hondas. I've done, you know, a lot of cams and valves, valve springs. I've done all that kind of stuff, but this will be my first time to completely assemble a short block myself from scratch. You know, picking bearings, you know, shooting for clearances that I'm shooting for. So this is my first time. So first time, you know, I taught myself how to use a micrometer, how to read a micrometer, dial bore gauge, how to, you know, I've spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos myself and reading and learning how to use these tools. You know, I bought a decent set of these tools. I didn't buy the crazy $1,000+ stuff, but I didn't buy the cheap stuff either. I think I spent about $700 for the set of micrometers and one dial and my dial bore gauge, all from Summit. I think Powerhouse or something was the brand. Yeah, but either way, you don't want to go really cheap. But if you're not a machinist, you're not building engines for a living, you know, obviously, you know, unless you just got the money to go buy the Toyo or whatever that brand is, like the crazy $2,000+, you know, set of tools. But that'll do it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm definitely happy to be here. I'm about to go eat dinner with the family, but I wanted to set the crank in there, but all that'll be left, I guess I'll do that. Maybe it's another video or the beginning of measuring for the rod stuff. But I'll basically have to unbolt all my mains again. I'll clean everything one more time, and then I'll probably re-lubricate the washers and the nuts and the threads of the studs and stuff and all that. And then I'll do assembly oil or grease, depending on. I'll probably do oil. I plan on having this done in a month, so I'll use assembly oil, lubricate the mains, lubricate my bearings and all that stuff, and I'll set it in. You know, keep all these bearings matched to where they're at, obviously, and then install the crank and torque it all to spec, and then I'll do a video on the thrust bearing, because you got to set your thrust while you're torquing the crank in. So yeah, that'll be another video. I'll be able to finish that, and I'll set the crank in and then spin it, and then you can know by the feel of spinning the crank, you know, if everything is good and right. But yeah, again, if you guys have any questions, hit me up, and like, comment, subscribe. Peace.